Welcome to Brian for Liberty. And as the message says, I am just a guy with a mic, so take it all with a grain of salt. I have been talking about the coronavirus and its effects on our economy for several episodes in a row now. And I'm going to continue to beat that dead horse because I don't think it's an issue that's getting enough attention. I don't think that we are recognizing the dangerous situation that we're starting to create in our economy with these continued shutdowns. There are significant headlines now coming out. There's significant talk, even getting attention by certain members of Congress, that we're starting to see major disruptions and starting to see cracks in the armor of our food supply system. Understand that the economic disaster that's going to follow this coronavirus hysteria is going to be every bit as damaging to life as the virus is itself. That's something that we're missing. And when you talk about needing to reopen the economy and we talk about getting people back to work, it's as if we don't care about human life because people don't recognize the fact that the economy and the devastation that's going to be left behind is going to take a toll on human life as well. There's study after study showing correlations between suicides and unemployment, substance abuse, domestic violence, all of those things. But like I said, we're also starting to see issues with our food supply chains. We have meatpacking plants that are closing down. We have farmers having to plow under vegetables because they can't get them to market. This is going to cause a serious problem. We have a very delicate supply chain. We're so used to having everything we need at our fingertips that it's almost inconceivable that that's not going to be the case. So we really need to start focusing on what it's going to take to get back to work. When you look at countries like South Korea that did probably the best job testing, you're seeing a mortality rate below 1% for coronavirus. In all the places where the testing has been lauded as being the best, the mortality rate's below 1%. We did this to flatten the curve, to slow down the spread. We've done that. People are not going to go back to their old behaviors. Restaurants aren't going to be crowded. Movie theaters aren't going to be open. I certainly don't think we're going to be sending kids back to public school. So there's no real reason to keep things closed down any longer. The curve has been flattened, and it's going to stay that way. It's never going to get to the curve that we've all seen with this dramatic spike right at the beginning. That's not going to happen anymore. We're not going to. That's an absolute. That chart that you've all seen is basically the if we did absolutely nothing chart. That doesn't exist anymore. That scenario doesn't exist. Furthermore, because we know what's out there and we know what's coming, it's time to start. We can start raising that healthcare capacity line. We know we can put up field hospitals. We know we can deploy the Navy ships, Comfort and Mercy. There's a lot of capability that we have now. We can turn our manufacturing attention to masks, ventilators. We have a lot of capacity in this country to deal with this, and we know it's what's coming. This is a virus that's not going to go away because we're hiding in our houses. So we need to get back to work because we're just delaying the inevitable. When we go back out there, this thing is going to fire back up. We need to be responsible. We need to wear gloves. We need to wear masks. We need to use hand sanitizer. We need to continue to social distance. We need to avoid large crowds. All those things we need to keep doing, but we need to allow people to get back to work. So we've got to get this thing dialed in. We've got to get back to work. It's just absolutely critical that we get this country moving again. So there's another thing that we're talking about that I don't think is getting quite enough attention, and I think you're starting to see some protests now around the country. And what it is this pervasive threat to our individual liberties that's seeping through the country. Okay, and right now we're under these stay-at-home orders. We're actually restricted to essential business has been closed, but we all know what's going on out there. And essentially, you have a suspension of our First Amendment rights. That's important. That's significant, people. That right now we've all willingly set aside a constitutional right so important that the Founding Fathers made it the First Amendment. Okay, the right to publicly gather, to peacefully assemble, the right to protest government. Those rights have been suspended. And a right isn't a privilege. We can't just set aside a right. Okay, a privilege is letting your 16-year-old borrow the car, and it can be taken away at any moment. That's a privilege. A right is inherent in our very existence and must be defended. So, in fact, now in a time of crisis is much more, it's even more important to make sure that we're taking steps to defend our rights. The problem in this nation that we have in this nation is that we've been so blessed and we have suffered and we've suffered so few hardships when compared to our forefathers, our forebears, our ancestors, however you want to say it. When you think about fighting a revolutionary war, a civil war, going through a Great Depression, fighting 2 world wars, we have been well fed and safe and comfortable and entertained for so long that we have lost the ability to defend our own liberties. And there's 2 parts to this. The first thing that you lose when you're well fed and comfortable, okay, is your distrust for central authority. When everything's going well, you feel very trustworthy of authority, okay? So we argue a lot about what the Founding Fathers, as a nation, we tend to argue a lot about what the Founding Fathers meant when they wrote certain amendments to the Constitution. But what we don't talk about a lot is that the first attempt to form a government in this country wasn't the Constitution, it was the Articles of Confederation, okay? So if you want to think about what the Founding Fathers were, what their thought process was behind these amendments, the Federalist Papers are a great way to get that information right from the horse's mouth. Go read the Federalist Papers. We don't really need to have an argument about what the Founding Fathers meant because they told us what they meant. But what's interesting is that you can also look at the fact that the first document they used, the first time they tried to form a government, they essentially created a government that didn't even have the power to establish a standing army or print a common currency. That's how afraid of central authority that the Founding Fathers were. They were terrified of that. What we don't understand anymore is that a tyrannical government is incredibly dangerous. And we've been so comfortable and well fed, and that our military might is so great. Our economic dominance has been so prevalent for so long that the society has this false sense of bravado, as if we'll never have to worry about that because we're so well protected from any kind of an outside threat. But the problem is that this disaster, this virus this catastrophe that we're dealing with right now, is really exposing how vulnerable we are to an internal threat, and that comes from having absolutely no tolerance for any form of suffering. And we cannot tolerate any suffering, any tragedy, or anything that appears to even be a threat to our way of life. And that may sound like a good thing, but it's not, because every time something negative happens, every time there's an issue, every time we are afraid or we appear to be in danger of losing our economic well-being or our physical health or our safety in any way, we immediately turn to authority and we immediately allow government to grow its power over us. Like I said, we have not suffered in the way that our forebears, our ancestors, the people who founded this nation. We haven't suffered the way that we have not suffered in this country the way that they have. And our low tolerance for suffering, for hardship, has led us to turn to government to solve all of our problems. And when we do that, government grows and grows and grows, and your rights and your liberties shrink. And history is replete with examples that show that that is terrifying. That tyrannical government always leads to massive human suffering. We need to be talking about liberty, and we need to be talking about our rights, and we need to be talking about how we can take steps to defend our liberties even in times of crisis. It's not a conversation we're having. That's something I'm going to be pounding on over the next few videos. I'm also going to be talking about, I'm going to dig in a little further into some of the comments I've been hearing about the food issues with the delivery lines, but I wanted to get this video out because it's been kind of rattling around in my head, and I've wanted to put this video out, and I wanted to kind of perfect it and dial it in. It's not perfect, but it's a message I think that needs to be put out there. So once again, thanks for stopping by, Brian for Liberty. I hope you will take a second and share this video if you like the content. Check it out on Spotify at Brian for Liberty as well, and certainly please click subscribe, and we will see you folks next time.